Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. We're going to quickly go over the strategies that I was discussing about in the previous video on how to quickly get through these licensing exams faster, right? So there's two important things that you want to keep in mind. The first thing is that we're going to be focused on 60% and beyond, right? So what that means is it doesn't matter whether we get 60, an 80, or even a 90. As long as we're above that 60 threshold, then we're in the passing and that's all that matters. So what this means is there's a total of 30 questions in all of the modules except for ethics. Ethics is a little bit less, but ultimately there's 30 questions. So 60% of 30 is 18 questions. So what that means now, the reason I break it down like this is because in this 75-minute period for the exams, we can treat it as an 18 question exam instead of 30, so that way we get more time on those questions. Now, of course, we want to still keep in a little bit of extra time and space to guess any remaining ones, right? You'll notice I actually mentioned the word guess because there will be some that you can guess and it doesn't really matter. But with this strategy, because we're finding the answers directly in the textbook, we're going to be pretty confident on those answers being correct. So if we just focus on 18 and use this strategy, and if we have remaining time and we do the same for any extra amount of questions or not, if we guess the remaining 12, we still have a great chance of passing. Now, because we got a great probability of the 18 being correct with the addition of those questions that are guessed to add potentially an extra point or two into that. So then we can actually pass a little bit beyond 60%. Okay. Now, with this strategy, we also want to keep in mind that for those questions that we skip, we're going to be skipping, at least for what I personally do, is skipping the math questions and the long questions. Now, the reason for the math questions is because we don't need to know any of the calculations when we're out into the field. So ultimately, it's a waste of time to know the formulas, memorize the formulas, how to apply it and whatnot. Because actually, when you're out in the field, we have software, we have tech, we have illustrations and all that stuff that does the calculation for us. So that is ultimately a waste of time. And if we're doing it in an exam setting, it might be more stressful. But of course, if you're great at math and you know the formulas and you can do that, then that could be an extra point for you, right? But if not, then we can go ahead and skip that. Now, the second one is long questions. Pretty self-explanatory because it is longer, so it takes up more time. But with the strategy that we use, which I'll show you in a second, is that it will definitely have more things going on and confuse us even more and even add on more time. So that's why, again, we're skipping the long questions too. Right, so those are the basics. Now going directly into the strategy, we have a 5-step strategy here and we follow it step by step. Okay, now step 1, identify the question. So once we're given the question, it sounds a little bit weird, but there's always going to be a background story before the question. So instead of reading all that, we can jump directly to the last sentence of all that summaries before the answers are listed. And again, I'll show you that as we go through in the next video, going through some examples. But ultimately, we read that single line and we figure out whether we understand what is going on or whether it's general enough that we don't have to read a background story. Now, not all cases will we be able to just skip reading the background story. So that's where step 2 comes in, where we read more if necessary. If the question didn't make any sense and if it was too broad or, well, not specific, or it didn't really make much sense in general, we can go ahead, go back up, read all the summaries, the background, and figure out what their story is, and then we can go from there. Now, once we get an understanding of what's going on, we go to step 3, and this is where we filter out all the answers. Is there any here that are obviously wrong, whether through practice or through our own intuition? This is where we can filter them out, put them on the side. Now, do keep in mind that either sometimes we might not have anything to filter at all, and that's okay, right? It starts to become easier if we practice more because then we can recognize some of the answers. But also keep in mind that even if we do filter out some of the answers, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're incorrect until we can prove it through the textbook. Right, and that again will make sense as we go through. But once we do that filtration process, whether we do filter anything or not, now we understand what the answers are available for us. Then we can go to step 4, which is to identify those keywords. And these are any words really that are descriptive in that particular question, maybe even repeated in that particular question often. And if we don't necessarily understand what it is, we can use those as keywords or even key phrases that we can search up in the textbook. So there's no right or wrong what a keyword is, but more so what is more effective. And the cool thing about the keywords is that we can be creative. Maybe we see a number right? And that number could be something that we can use as a keyword, or there's a certain phrase that seems like it's out of place. We can use that as well, right? So there's no right or wrong, but ultimately with speed, we can get through more keywords faster to find our answer, right? So you guys are thinking like, what is this guy talking about keywords? What is it even for? Well, that leads us into step 5, which is where we actually transition over to the textbook and we search up those keywords that we just thought about in the textbook. And I'll show you how you can search the words up until we find our answer, which is a pretty cool thing because our answer is either going to be word for word or slightly paraphrased if we're going to be using this strategy, which is a pretty cool thing. So it'll always be able to find us an answer. Right, so that's the 5 steps that I wanted to go over really quickly. And what we're going to do in the next video is show you exactly how to utilize this strategy. I'll see you in the next video.